For the past decades, humanity has been dedicated to developing new technologies, expanding human knowledge, and discovering new forms of living. However, we have forgotten about our planet. Caps melting, sea levels rising, forests disappearing, and climate warming. We are living the consequences of environmental degradation. We must stop our unsustainable practices. A transition to a green economy is necessary to restore, transform, and evolve as humanity. Using renewable forms of energy will lead us to a better, more sustainable way of living. Solar energy gives us the opportunity to be more efficient without causing harm. Wind energy is a clean and safe alternative to produce electricity for everyone, everywhere. Renewable energy allows us to be sustainable and move away from fossil fuels. Time is running out. We need to work together and support each other to find solutions to these challenges. Protecting our environment is protecting our future. A holistic approach is necessary to reverse the damage caused by humanity. Every sector in society needs to commit. Governments need to develop policies that will protect our nature and compensate the damage caused. The private sector must become carbon neutral and commit to advanced eco-friendly products. NGOs and civil society need to support and lead by example in their communities. Young people must continue speaking up for the planet and hold the older generation accountable for their promises. The commitment of young people is unstoppable. They bring innovation, creativity, and passion to tackle the greatest global issues. What is the kind of planet you want to leave to your children and grandchildren? What would you say to the future generations when it is too late to save the environment? Our time is now. World Green Growth Summit.
Greetings. It fills my heart with joy and promise to see so many people here that care about the future of the planet and the human race. I applaud you all. As we try to navigate through those troubling times, it's imperative that we continue to move forward. This is the mission statement of the World Green Growth Summit. So follow us into the future of green technology and a cleaner world for all. During this 3-day virtual summit, we will have professional speakers who have spent the majority of their lives cultivating and perfecting the field of green energy. This dedication has inspired the masses and has shined a light on the severity to save this world. We are all aware that the planet is warming. The actions need to be taken will determine the fate of our future and possibly the human race. Information is key. The World Green Growth Summit main goal is to build a strong network for opportunities and a platform for the people to bring new ideas and innovation to this growing green industry. To educate and promote a sustainable world for now and future generations. We will go over some of our accomplishments as well as some of our weaknesses so we can have an understanding of what needs to be done as a unified front and why we are here at the World Green Growth Organization are trying to cultivate and transcend. We the people need to have our voices here. We need to make sure the politicians that have been voted into office stay true to their promises and carry out their decree. We cannot stand by and let this destruction continue. We always want the future better than the past. Thank you and welcome to the World Green Growth Summit 2021.
Greetings. I'm Gabby Tejeda, and I represent our youth on behalf of the World Green Growth Summit 2021. There are 1.8 billion people between the ages of 15 and 29 in the world. We must enable the youth to bring their drive, determination, and new ideas. Young people are particularly engaged on climate change. 65% of those in the age group of 18 to 35 consider climate change to be a global emergency. Of the world's near 3 billion youth, the majority live in regions with the greatest energy needs. 60% of Africans are under 25, making it the youngest continent in the world. Many of these young Africans have not grown up with reliable electricity. Bringing them the technology and educating the youth could dramatically impact the continent. Overall, educating the youth is key. By developing young adults to have the knowledge and the know-how, we can show them the way so that they can one day lead the way. This is the way we can ensure and accelerate the energy revolution. I hope this summit brings everyone together to find a common ground, to collaborate and to develop solutions for a sustainable future. We are going to discuss future and the youth in COP26 negotiations, including opportunities for all of us. We must take action now and empower our communities, organizations, our youth, and everyone around the world to stand up and tackle climate change. We must continue working together for a better future. World Green Growth Summit 2021.
Welcome everyone to the 2021 World Green Growth Summit. I am a foreign correspondent based in London working for Fox News, and I'm so honored and pleased to be here as the Master of Ceremonies to kick off this 3-day event. It really is amazing. In the last 2 years, so many of us have lived through our computer screens. And that being said, it is still amazing to see so many people joining us from all over the world, different continents, different time zones, all here to talk about the same subject. So during these 3 days, from November 17th until November 19th, we'll hear from an array of different topics, people who will be speaking from different breadths of experience, but all again for the same goal of improving this one planet that is ours. The goal of this is to link different leaders from around the world and give them the platform to have those real conversations at the same time, regardless of where they are. Many of the goals that we will hear are how to create more jobs while not ignoring the impact that it could have on the environment, but really focusing on how to create a better and a safer world. Now, the setback and potential issues when we have these conversations are, how does this impact the world financially? How does this impact businesses that are already running and workers and families who depend on those industries that could be in jeopardy? Well, those are some of the concerns that people might have and questions that they might bring to the table. And again, the reason for having such a platform to discuss these various topics. Another key concern that we've seen in the last 2 years now, the impact of the pandemic and the economic toll that's taken across the world, and how it's potentially slowed down many of these green achievements that have been striving for around the world, with the threat of the virus, COVID-19, still very real and taking issue around the world. Some of the things that we've seen recently in recent weeks, COP26, the global summit for leaders to arrive together and discuss climate change. I traveled to Scotland for that event as these world leaders made promises and pledges to not only curbing back on emissions, but also tackling and re-improving some of the areas that we've seen around the world that have been devastated already by environmental change. And in this summit, what we will see in the next couple of days, it's a chance for global leaders to also speak to corporate heads and environmental activists. And together they will talk about their hopes and their goals and their missions to create more jobs that are more eco-friendly, more sustainable, to create a better business model, not for just right now, but for future generations. So it is my pleasure to introduce the Intergovernmental Committee, and that includes Mohammed Alan Shah, Director of Foreign Affairs of AH, and Sheikh Marwan bin Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, the Chairman of India Greenpeace Society.
I, Mohammed Alam Shah, would like to give gratitude to our chairperson, Alessandra Granado. She is the one who brings this opportunity to us, to gratitude to entire world as well, who are participating and who are giving support to World Green Growth Summit 2021. It is indeed a matter of honor to me to be a part of this ministerial panel discussion on the future of green economy at the World Green Growth Summit 2021. As a policy matter of any government, circular economy policies are very important, but we need a comprehensive framework involving the social and cultural key factors to it. Without social and cultural strategic policies, sustainability is merely a word. We have to examine how government, institution and organization contribute to sustainability through the aggressive involvement of our society. Being a 24/7 environment television channel in UAE, our focus is sustainability, broadly conceived as a more than the preservation of environment and natural resources. We are interested in culture-led sustainable development and practice to ensure the long-lasting green environment. As we know, our His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum is very aggressive, and he has taken initiative in 2020 as an expo. There you can see there is a lot of positive initiative has been taken by His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum. I must appreciate the Japan government initiatives of Society 5.0 for initiating the policy framework for the comprehensive sustainability social environment. Also, we must appreciate the United Arab Emirates government for initiating the implementing the sustainability policies right at the doorstep of Expo 2020 as the biggest initiative for the sustainable green environment.
Next, I would like to introduce our full panel of keynote speakers. Again, people arriving from all over the world, and they are as follows. Dr. Honorable Nicolette Odella Henry. She is a parliament member and also a former minister of education in Guyana. Second, we have Carlos Alfredo Lazare Teixeira, is an ambassador of Brazil. Honorable Shahira Wabi, an ambassador of the League of Arab States and former Director's Office and Assistant Secretary of Economic Impact and Diversity at the U.S. Department of Energy. That is James Campos. And then we have Dr. Yassim Falahi, the Minister of Environment in Iraq. Ivan Solari, the General Counsel of Peru. And Lakshman Namal Rajapaksa, who is the Sri Lankan Minister of Youth and Sports. So first, I would like to please welcome Dr. Honorable Nicolette Henry.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you to the organizers of the 2021 World Green Growth Summit for the opportunity to speak at this important forum on this very critical issue of green economy and education. I am indeed pleased to be part of your distinguished panel of speakers for this year's summit. In the next few minutes, I will be highlighting the role of education in advancing sustainable development. Madam Chair, I am encouraged by the clarion call of this summit to move from policy to action, as it offers hope that we will be using today's opportunity to rethink tomorrow's education. As we move from policy to action, education will stand out as a key pillar, given that Sustainable Development Goal 4 and the Education 2030 agenda recognize the transformative power of education in relation to all other SDGs. In particular, Target 4.7 calls for key education for sustainable development themes to be mainstreamed in curricular content, teaching practices, and assessments, and for education for sustainable development to be given greater import in policy planning. Against this background, I think the positioning of education as an imperative to the green economy is well positioned, especially given that teaching and learning institutions are essential sites for normative and transformative changes, and once carefully managed, both have the potential to realize the growing demands for green skills and throughout the green economic continuum. That, I believe, Madam Chair, is enough reason for the education sector to be recognized as one of the priority areas for green skills development, which is, of course, a precursor for the successful transition to a green economy. I also believe we have to look at education as the cornerstone of the Sustainable Development Goals set by the United Nations for 2030. And if we fail on education, the entire construct of sustainable development will fail. As someone who has served as a Minister of Education, I would like to share some thoughts on some of the strategies that countries can consider as they move from policy to action. And today I offer up 3 recommendations. Firstly, I will touch on the need for a political commitment. Secondly, I will offer a perspective on the significance of coordination among different sectors of society, particularly institutions that build human capital. And my number 3 is resource allocation to match the task at hand. None of these will be easily achieved. However, we must never get tired of making the case for education as a global priority. I know many countries are working towards implementing regulatory frameworks with a view of making their economies more sustainable. A key challenge, however, continues to be concerns in existing fields of training and learning. Education stands at the heart of this agenda as a basic human right, as a transformational force for poverty eradication, as the engine for sustainability, and as a driver of dialogue and peace. If we do not take bold actions and prepare the learners of today for the future of tomorrow, all societies will be in jeopardy. We have to invest in nurturing and promoting green skills, which I recommend should include knowledge, values, and attitudes, as well as technical skills that are imperative to promoting sustainable economic, environmental, and social outcomes. From that standpoint, the development of green skills will have to be incorporated into the upgrading of workers' skills as well as the development of new skills, so that every job is going to have to contribute to making the economy more sustainable. We can anticipate that learners in both formal and informal education settings will need to acquire green skills. As experts, policymakers, legislators, and decision makers, we must not only transform our economies, but also our classrooms to encourage critical thinking, initiative, and new competencies. Only then will we manage to make production and consumption sustainable, to provide new skills for greener industries, and to orient higher education and research towards sustainable innovation. This definitely calls for a new focus on recruiting, supporting, and training teachers across the spectrum. The stakes are high, Madam Chair. So in order to meet the demands for green skills, a multitude of stakeholders will need to engage in educational efforts. And while there will be a need for government to play a leading role in facilitating the provisions of green skills, a collaborative effort by a number of stakeholders, including employers and education institutions, will be necessary to tackle this challenge. Of course, this will have to be country specific based on local content national policy, and certainly the political will and leadership of each country working towards realizing a green economy. We know too well that the international expert community for some time now has been calling for a green transition, which is dependent on education keeping up with the changing dynamics of what works and what is sustainable in the face of challenges. Speaking of challenges, many of the weaknesses of the education sector has been exacerbated with the global learning disruptions in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, which has presented an unprecedented risk to learners' education, including education for sustainable development, which is distinctively fitted to contribute to the process of achieving green economies as it lay out a carefully designed conceptual plan for providing skills which will be necessary for mastering the transition to a green economy. Of course, we cannot secure a sustainable future in a matter of months, but with a well-designed set of commitments and targets, we can move onto the right path, and with effective educational programs that instill in future generations the importance of restoring Earth's balance and delivering a prosperous future for many rather than the few. And we can stay on that path. In concluding my remarks, I wish to reiterate that education can bring about a fundamental shift in how we think, act, and discharge our responsibilities towards one another and towards the planet. After all, education is the most important investment a country can make. We must all invest now for a better future tomorrow. I thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Please welcome Honorable Carlos Lazarete Teixeira, the Brazilian ambassador, joining us.
Satisfacción estar con ustedes en esta cumbre mundial para el crecimiento verde. Como ha sido mencionado, yo soy el director ejecutivo de la Organización del Tratado de Cooperación Amazónica, o sea, que les hablo desde Brasil, donde está la sede de nuestra organización, y que esta organización que incluye 8 países amazónicos: Bolivia, Brasil, Colombia, Ecuador, Guyana, Perú, Surinam y Venezuela. Como saben ustedes, la Amazonía ocupa 44% del territorio de América del Sur, y por su inmensa relevancia natural, cultural, social, entre otras características, es impensable no considerarla en un escenario post-pandemia como parte esencial en una recuperación no solo económica, sino también ambiental y social. Y eso incluye naturalmente el objeto de nuestro encuentro y de este summit, de esta cumbre. Y por ser biomas de amplias y complejas interconexiones, la Amazonía requiere de medidas a nivel sistémico, transfronterizo y multisectorial. Por ello, en 78, los 8 países decidieron firmar el Tratado de Cooperación Amazónica, que dio curso a la organización 20 años después, en la secuencia de las decisiones y del desdoblamiento de la pauta internacional en materia de desarrollo sostenible después de la cumbre Río 92. Y la óptica es un espacio crucial con una visión y accionar regional. O sea, trabajamos en la dimensión regional de los 8 países para la coordinación y armonización de políticas públicas y para el intercambio de conocimientos, así como para la generación de cooperación técnica y financiera para enfrentar los principales desafíos, incluyendo la adaptación y mitigación al cambio climático. Trabajamos en cooperación sur-sur entre los 8, distribuyendo y copiando y trabajando con las mejores prácticas, los buenos ejemplos, las buenas soluciones, para disminuir también las asimetrías naturales entre los países en sus políticas públicas hacia sus territorios, ¿no? Pero es que esas políticas públicas sean convergentes. Y nuestra agenda estratégica está naturalmente referenciada a los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible, y trabajamos con una agenda positiva, trabajando en los denominadores comunes de los 8 países y con su visión amazónica. Una premisa básica de nuestro trabajo es la centralidad del ser humano. Son cerca de 40 millones de habitantes en la región amazónica que necesitan mejorar sus condiciones de vida con mayor igualdad y generando oportunidades rentables con mayor productividad. Essa visión no se contrapone a un modelo de desarrollo que comprenda que la mayor riqueza que tiene la Amazonía es el bosque en pie, que permite el uso de su enorme potencial biodiverso. La preservación del ciclo hidrológico que ocurre en ella y el resguardo de los saberes ancestrales y de los pueblos indígenas. Los enfoques holísticos ya están incorporados a nuestra agenda, como el enfoque de una salud que congrega salud humana, animal y ambiental, y el concepto, la metodología Nexus, que también busca el equilibrio entre agua, energía y alimentos. Esos son, digamos, los enfoques que hoy día gobiernan nuestra actuación, nuestra quehacer en la región. Para esto, naturalmente, se necesita tecnología, innovación, ciencia, investigación aplicada, mayores capacidades y recursos financieros volcados a la biodiversidad amazónica para generar recursos a partir de una producción e industrialización sustentable de los productos amazónicos, agregando valor no solo económico, sino también social y ambiental a las iniciativas de las pequeñas y medianas empresas, de los emprendedores de las comunidades y ciudades amazónicas. Con el compromiso de incrementar los esfuerzos nacionales y regionales, tanto en la lucha contra el cambio climático, así como en la preservación y uso sostenible de la biodiversidad, los 8 países acordaron por unanimidad este año aprobar el Programa de Diversidad Biológica para la región amazónica, que es esto que está publicado en nuestra página de la internet, que es otica.org, ¿no? www.otica.org. El Programa de Gestión Sostenible de los Bosques, el Memorando de Entendimiento para Combate al Fuego, la gestión integral del fuego, manejo integral del fuego, y la primera evaluación rápida de la diversidad biológica de los servicios y funciones ecosistémicas con la metodología de la plataforma IPBS, Plataforma Intergovernmental de Biodiversidad y Servicios Ecosistémicos, que será un hito histórico a nivel científico, producido por expertos y poseedores de conocimiento amazónicos para guiar las políticas públicas de los países. Estos 4 instrumentos se constituyen en el marco institucional regional que permitirá implementar diversas acciones y estrategias conjuntas para la región más efectiva de la biodiversidad, para la gestión más efectiva de la biodiversidad y del bosque amazónico, tomando en cuenta, por supuesto, las funciones y servicios ecosistémicos, la bioeconomía, el control de la deforestación ilegal, una mejor planificación y gestión territorial, implementación de sistemas agroforestales, de sistemas de trazabilidad de productos, entre otras acciones. Y eso incluye también las espécimes de la fauna y de la flora en condiciones con peligro de extinción. No puedo dejar de mencionar el pilar de recursos hídricos en nuestra agenda de trabajo. Estamos en el montaje de la red hidrológica amazónica y que va a incorporar también parámetros de verificación de calidad del agua para beneficio de las poblaciones y también para garantizar la sostenibilidad de los recursos pesqueros, el saneamiento básico y agua potable. Y también estamos presentando a posibles cooperantes un gran proyecto de mapeo del acuífero Amazonas, que algunos tal vez no sepan, es un depósito de aguas subterráneas que en la Amazonía tiene tal vez 2, 3 veces más agua potable en el subsuelo que en la superficie. Todos esos programas y proyectos estarán incluidos en el Observatorio Regional Amazónico, gracias a la cooperación alemana del Banco de Desarrollo KfW, que es un foro virtual permanente que propicia el flujo de información entre instituciones y autoridades de los países miembros responsables por las políticas públicas para sus territorios amazónicos. Trabajamos para consolidar el observatorio como un centro de referencia de información regional en biodiversidad, recursos naturales y sociodiversidad en la Amazonía. Para que puedan cumplirse estos objetivos, se necesita mayor cooperación e inversión pública y privada. En la región amazónica es imperativo ser creativo y original para generar nuevos modelos de desarrollo y nuevos modelos de cooperación. La aplicación de inteligencia artificial, de la innovación, de la tecnología y gobernanza digital son algunas de las herramientas que implícitamente deben estar presentes en nuevas inversiones, en la nueva cooperación y en el multilateralismo para esta región. Estamos convencidos de que la Amazonía necesita políticas públicas permanentes de Estado, capaces de generar acciones coherentes de largo aliento, de largo plazo. Por eso saludamos la decisión de los congresos de los países miembros de reactivar el Parlamento Amazónico, el Parlamás, liderados por los representantes de las comunidades amazónicas en los respectivos parlamentos nacionales. Tenemos muchos aliados estratégicos, de los cuales vale mencionar la cooperación alemana, europea, cooperación con Francia, el Banco Interamericano de Desarrollo, la Agencia Brasileña de Cooperación, la Agencia de Naciones Unidas para el Medio Ambiente, el PNUMA, la CEPAL, que es la Comisión Económica para América Latina, y la Organización Panamericana de Salud. En este marco, ponderamos la realización de esta cumbre para generar puentes de conocimiento, de experiencias y tecnologías exitosas para la atracción de nuevas inversiones y oportunidades de trabajo conjunto. Y agradecemos la invitación a la OTCA, ACTO, para contribuir a un mejor entendimiento de la inmensidad que significa gestionar la Amazonía, no únicamente por su extensión geográfica, sino también porque es compartida entre 8 países con visiones propias, pero que efectivamente han demostrado estar unidas por la Amazonía. Por ello, consideramos importante que existan oportunidades de trabajar a nivel regional amazónico con todas las entidades que participan de esta cumbre. Así que les agradezco muchísimo el espacio. Muchas gracias por su atención.
Gracias, Ambassador. Now, please welcome me for our next speaker, who is Shahira Wabi, the ambassador at the League of Arab States.
Thank you very much. Allow me at the outset to express my appreciation and thanks to Her Excellency, Senora Alejandra Geraldo, Chairwoman of the World Green Growth Summit, for inviting me to speak in this important summit and to be a member of the Board of Directors of the World Green Growth Organization for this year, 2021. I assure you, Madam, of my unequivocal support and dedication. Well, today, I was requested to give a small message on the perspective of sustainable development and green growth in the Arab region. But today, I find the world is passing through one of the most critical economic situations in generations, due to one of the most dreadful disasters that confronted mankind, namely COVID-19. The concentration on reducing the risk of this global disaster created a sort of unbalance in all countries of the world and shifted priorities. concentration on containing the disease became the priority for every government and nation. Economic growth has been affected in many regions, let alone green growth. For me, I view the pandemic as an opportunity for green growth and achieving the Sustainable Development Agenda. According to an initial statement by the International Labour Organization, the COVID-19 pandemic scenario would see global economic activity being severely disrupted and the world gross domestic product falling by 8%. Among the economic sectors most severely affected by the pandemic are the healthcare sector and the food security sector, as well as the petroleum, tourism, and air transport sectors, and of course, all the other sectors. The world was not prepared to face the pandemic. The Arab countries are no exception. The governments in the Arab region face greater difficulties at the national and local levels in light of the growing fragility, increasing needs, and pressing or scarce and diminishing financial resources. The response of each of the Arab countries to the pandemic matched their economic capabilities, the degree of development of the health sector, and societal awareness. ESCWA estimated the economic loss and cost of the crisis as follows: loss of 420 billion in market capital, which is 8% of the region's wealth, loss of 63 billion in income of the member states, additional debt of 220 billion, equivalent to 8% of the region's gross domestic product, loss of 550 million per day in oil revenues if oil prices remain between 25 and 30 per barrel, a decline in exports of 28 billion, and a loss of more than 2 billion in tariff revenues, the loss of almost 1.7 million jobs in 2020, driving of 8.3 million of the region's residents into poverty. The increase in poverty could drive 1.9 million of the region's residents to malnutrition, and food shortages and malnutrition will pose a critical challenge as the region imports food worth of $100 billion annually. 55 million people in need of humanitarian aid face additional threats. So, in front of all these things, most of the Arab countries have taken precautionary measures as an attempt to address the spread of the pandemic and avoid reaching high numbers of recorded cases that exceed the capacities of the healthcare system to provide care. But let us view it from another perspective. The pandemic constitutes an opportunity to reverse the current frameworks, which are biased in favor of resurrecting an unsustainable economy. It creates a prospects to make a major contribution to reviving the world economy, saving and creating jobs, and protecting vulnerable groups, to promoting sustainable and inclusive growth and the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, to reducing carbon dependency and ecosystem degradation. The major key risks along a path to green growth and sustainable world economy can be addressed through targeted stimulus spending, through prioritizing energy efficient buildings and investments in sustainable transport and renewable energy, investment in agricultural productivity measures, freshwater management and sanitation. All these have exceptional social and societal returns. Changes in domestic policies is another way, through substantially reducing subsidies and creating a positive incentives and appropriate taxes which will encourage a greener economy. Domestic reforms that address common issues in land use and urban policy. Integrated management of fresh water would also require some domestic policy changes. Domestic policy responses should be based on effective monitoring and accountability and integrate the principles of environmental accounting. Changes in international policy architecture is also a one method, and this can happen through attention in the areas of trade, aid, carbon pricing, and technology and policy coordination. This new policy should strive for reformed global carbon markets that aim to improve and institute just pricing, a revamped and more inclusive clean development mechanism, solid global markets for ecosystems services, a more effective global Green New Deal supported by international cooperation and coordination, a more supportive UN system, a more effective policy to confront climate change and reduce disaster risks and realize the Sustainable Development Goals. It is evident that many developing countries, among which are the Arab countries, do not have the sufficient resources of their own and will have to rely on international support, both financial and non-financial, to transform to green economy and opt for green growth. In spite of this, the Arab countries joined hands with the rest of the world in adopting a green growth path and committed to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. The League of Arab States, acting as the technical secretariat for many Arab ministerial councils, adopted practical steps towards achieving green growth and the Sustainable Development Goals. Priority areas have been specified, namely energy efficiency and renewable energy use through the scaling up of solar, wind, wave thermal, and bioenergy in the total energy mix. The Arab region is endowed with all these sources of energy. Sustainable building and construction, sustainable consumption and production, sustainable transport system in the Arab region, particularly in megacities, sustainable chemicals and waste management, sustainable agricultural systems, and ecosystem management and biodiversity, in addition to integrated water management and conservation. And finally, green job creation. The main objectives of the Arab countries for voluntarily adopting a policy of green growth and economy in the Arab region is to address the financial and economic problems, while at the same time facing social, environmental, and sustainable development challenges. Achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, including the eradication of poverty, is implemented through the involvement of all relevant stakeholders, including civil society institutions and the private sector. The overall focus of the Arab region is on youth and women's employment, renewable energy and energy efficiency, and food and water security. The Arab region needs to focus on green economy approaches, particularly in the midst of climate change and increasing demand for energy, taking into consideration the promotion of conservation and sustainable use of natural resources, preserving and enhancing ecosystem services, and ensuring the sustainable and efficient use of renewable natural resources. The region needs to raise awareness among policymakers, experts, and development practitioners to emphasize achieving resource-efficient, low-carbon, and socially inclusive economies. The solution will emphasize the development opportunities that a green economy offers, not only concerning the environment, but also in the economic and social dimensions of sustainability. To conclude, it goes without saying that green economy and sustainable growth are interlinked. The greening of economies in the Arab region presents many opportunities to achieve multiple objectives. It has the potential to be an engine of growth, economic growth, and a net generator of decent green jobs that can contribute significantly to poverty eradication and social inclusion. The crucial role of environmental considerations embedded in an adequate green growth policy frame is evident and will inevitably lead to transition to an inclusive green economy. All this will positively affect the welfare of the Arab peoples. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shahira, for your perspective on the impact of Arab states. Now I would like to introduce our next speaker. This is James Campos, former Director's Office and Assistant Secretary of Economic Impact and Diversity at the US DOE, Department of Energy. Welcome, James.
It is my honor to be here with you today, addressing the 2021 World Green Growth Summit. And thank you to the committee for inviting me to be part of this distinguished panel. Today, I'd like to focus my discussion on the lack of safe, low carbon, and affordable large-scale energy alternatives to fossil fuels. Until we adequately scale up those alternatives, the world without question will continue to face those two energy problems of today. Indeed, we are in a state of transition, but we need to be pragmatic, thoughtful, and steadfast on how we transition and the manner in which we do so in order to limit the potential dangers and unintended negative effects of a revolutionary type of change rather than the more traditional evolutionary change process that the world has historically experienced with mass energy. In a rapid transition, if not developed properly, can lead to a multitude of unintended consequences. Currently, and the clear reality of the situation predicts that by 2050, we will still be getting about 75% of our energy from fossil-based fuels. So while we seek for cleaner energy alternatives and increase existing green energy sources, it is critical that we figure out how to reduce carbon dioxide emissions from those energy sources. That is going to require carbon capture, storage, and utilization. And that means we will have to continue aggressive R&D initiatives in all these areas, at the same time deploy a low carbon, all the above energy approach. Today, I advocate an all of the above energy policy that utilizes all of our resources while aggressively investing into our clean energy economy. I strongly encourage the increased development of both carbon reduction and carbon recycling technologies. And we cannot forget alternative clean forms of reliable and sustainable energy production, such as nuclear energy. Nuclear energy and the advancement of modular nuclear reactors is a promising addition to the mix of the sustainable clean energy tapestry of tomorrow. Now, the energy problem that receives the most attention is the link between energy affordability access and greenhouse gas emissions.
Please welcome Iván Solari, General Counsel of Peru.
Muchas gracias. Quiero agradecer a la Organización Mundial para el Crecimiento Verde y a los organizadores de la Segunda Cumbre Mundial para el Crecimiento Verde que me extendieron esta invitación para participar ante una entre distinguidos panelistas y profesionales del ambiente. Indudablemente, el tema del medio ambiente es un tema de políticas públicas de muchísima actualidad. Y ya hemos escuchado a grandes panelistas, a profesionales del medio ambiente, que se han referido a este tema con mucha propiedad y alcanzando recomendaciones que indudablemente deben implementarse con urgencia, porque el mundo está en crisis, porque el mundo tiene una tremenda crisis ambiental, más aún ahora que esta crisis se acentúa por los efectos negativos en la economía, en la sociedad, en el crecimiento sostenible de los países. No importa si son desarrollados o no, pero indudablemente debemos aceptar que los países en vías de desarrollo han sido y son aún los más afectados. La política de medio ambiente debe ser un mandato constitucional para todos nuestros países. Es un mandato que obedece a la razón de existir. Y esto debe estar orientado a las actividades sociales, ambientales, económicas, que ya dije son de cumplimiento obligatorio y que propicie y asegure el uso sostenible, responsable, racional de los recursos naturales para lograr un desarrollo integral en armonía con el entorno. En este sentido, debemos decir que, y lo mencioné al inicio, tener una política medioambiental es y debe ser un mandato constitucional, porque ello constituye la herramienta, el instrumento fundamental para el desarrollo sostenible de cualquier país. Y esto, creo yo, en el caso del Perú, por ejemplo, pero así de muchos otros países, nosotros tenemos una biodiversidad, como ya ha sido mencionado por el director del OTCA, el embajador Lázari, del Tratado Amazónico, que incluye a 8 países amazónicos, y que esta Amazonía nuestra constituye el 44%, y por qué no decirlo así, digamos, un potencial natural, ecológico, de una envergadura única, ¿no es verdad? Esta preocupación de nuestros países data de hace muchísimo tiempo y hay un esfuerzo conjunto para preservar nuestros recursos vitales. No hacerlo implicaría atentar contra nuestra propia supervivencia y esto crearía serios problemas de toda índole. Hoy por hoy tenemos una preocupación, digamos, constante, está referida al deterioro de los recursos naturales, a la pérdida de la diversidad y densidad, si se quiere, biológica, la afectación de la calidad ambiental. Tenemos grandes, y sobre todo en los países en vía de desarrollo, tenemos grandes problemas con lo que es la contaminación de las aguas, contaminación industrial por los agroquímicos, la minoría informal. En el caso del Perú es muy notorio y bueno, tenemos problemas graves de esta naturaleza, pero estos problemas se acentúan cuando los niveles de crecimiento del país se ven altamente afectados tradicionalmente. Y hay una responsabilidad sobre esto, indudablemente, y que hay una legislación que procuramos que esto pueda, digamos, de alguna manera paliar los efectos negativos de políticas que a veces son medioambientales, que a veces son difíciles de poder implementar, eso también es cierto. Pero también hay una responsabilidad mayor. Hay países emisores, hay países con una gran responsabilidad hacia la humanidad, por decirlo en términos generales, y estos son los países desarrollados. Y claro, estas crisis que se ven venir pueden tener otro tipo de afectaciones. Hace mucho tiempo ya se ve afectaciones que han provocado, por ejemplo, desplazamientos humanitarios, desplazamientos de grupos humanos de un país a otro y migraciones a veces, digamos, cuestionadas o poco deseadas, pero que buscan, ¿no es verdad?, migraciones que buscan un mejor nivel de vida porque por efectos naturales, por efectos ambientales, han podido estas poblaciones ser desplazadas y buscar, digamos, buscar soluciones fuera de sus países. Y si el medio ambiente no es respetado, entonces las migraciones y las crisis, en este caso, que son humanitarias, se van a seguir produciendo y aún más se van a acentuar. Y se van a acentuar porque el ser humano tiende a sobrevivir. Y para sobrevivir tiene que buscar nuevos elementos que les permitan a ellos, a sus familias, poder hacerlo. Entonces, creo que la atención a lo que es las políticas medioambientales es una prioridad que debe ser tomada muy en serio, tan en serio como en algún momento, ¿no es cierto?, ante crisis mundiales, pues hubo un compartimiento racional y se crearon las Naciones Unidas. Ante problemas también existentes con los océanos, pues se creó la Conferencia del Mar, y yo creo que la cuestión del ambiente tiene una envergadura aún para el siglo XXI mayor, es decir, la responsabilidad es tan grande que nos cumple a todos, conscientemente aplicar políticas de desarrollo sostenible para ser compartidas, además, en lo que es y la parte tecnológica, y los países altamente desarrollados tecnológicamente tienen una responsabilidad en lo que es el manejo, sostenible de los recursos. Estamos hablando del agua, estamos hablando de los residuos, el waste, ¿no? Material residual, estamos hablando del aire, estamos hablando de asuntos de energía. Y entonces, claro está, creo que es responsabilidad de todos. Y hago un llamado para que los participantes acá y aquellos interesados en cuestiones medioambientales puedan indudablemente sumarse a una campaña que pueda tener efectos, en la toma de decisiones y en la construcción de políticas públicas que tiendan a la preservación del medio ambiente. Esto sería mi intervención, porque es verdad, ya los distinguidos panelistas que me han precedido han vertido todas las consideraciones y conceptos que tienen que ver con este tema que nos preocupa tanto. Muchas gracias, espero no haberme extendido en demasía. Gracias.
Next, I would like to welcome Honorable Lakshman Namal Rajapaksa, the Minister of Youth and Sports in Sri Lanka.
Hi, everyone. First, let me thank the organizers for giving me the opportunity to speak a few words today. I think that the World Green Growth Summit is a very timely initiative, especially considering the context of the world today. We have all seen the adverse impact of climate change, and if we do not address these issues and figure out a way that we can reduce our carbon footprint to generations that comes after us. Following COP26, after much deliberation, global leaders have finally come to consensus on measures to be taken on climate change. However, this may not be enough. We as global citizens have to understand the impact of global warming and climate change. It is a very real threat that we will not only affect us, but will affect all who follow us. It is our responsibility as individuals to make the effort to go green. While governments and leaders make legislation and policy decisions, as people, we need to make the change a reality. COVID-19 has pushed us to our limits and showed us how well we can adapt to change. Therefore, changing our consumer patterns and reducing our carbon footprint is not a tall ask. If we put our hearts and minds to anything, I believe we can achieve it. We owe it to the generations to come. Countries like mine, with limited resources, are trying our utmost to cut down on our carbon footprint. We are looking at renewable energy sources and moving out of chemical fertilizer. On the ground level, we advocate heavily for home gardening and self-sustainable households. This is something that even I practice in my home. In some areas, we lack the technical knowledge and infrastructure for which we seek assistance from our friends, but we still try. I urge the youth of the world to speak up about climate change. This world is your inheritance and you must fight for it. Push your leaders and your elders to see the importance of climate change. Start in your home, in your schools, in your universities, in your workplace, in your countries, and eventually you will change the world. One day, You will be the leaders of this world. Stand firm in what you believe. In you is the power to change the world. I thank the World Green Growth Organization for the efforts that they have taken, and I pledge my support to the initiative. Thank you.
I would like to introduce Danny Vargas, who is going to be one of our moderators for the event. So I will let him jump up on here so we can get into a little bit more discussion as to not only hearing about some of these perspectives, but hearing also some of the setbacks that we've seen, some of the concerns that people have, and how we move forward with advice that we give to others about how you can create these kinds of technologies, incorporate more sustainability in a safe and fair way.
Thanks so much for everything that you've done this morning. And thanks to everyone that's joining us today. You know, we're here to talk about the importance of a sober and sensible approach to ensuring our shared home, planet Earth, remains a source of prosperity, opportunity, and safety for all of our human family, today as well as tomorrow. You know, we've heard from some wonderful panelists, and we'll be able to ask some important, engaging questions for each and every one of them. And we look forward to continuing the dialogue over the next day or two. Thanks very much. Well, I'll go ahead and start with our questions. I'll start with Minister Henry. Madam Minister, you spoke passionately about education in your country. You spoke incredibly well about the importance of making sure that we're all educated on a variety of subjects. And you've been such an incredible leader in your own country and an advocate for education. Can you tell us briefly, in your words, how we can make sure that governments throughout the world continue to focus on educating our population, our young boys and girls, and our adults about the importance of a green approach to technology today and in the future?
Us to have the kinds of support from governments. First of all, we need to close the gap between awareness and understanding of the issue of education for sustainable development. In my presentation, I touched on the pandemic as a major challenge to the delivery of education and also impacting education for sustainable development. I believe that if we are to prioritize the resources in terms of the financing, and if we are also to look at how we transition to green skills, which will involve to a great extent changing of mindset through teaching and learning, and if we are to ensure that sectors that are working in human development capacity building are all on board, I believe that we will definitely be able to make some advancement globally towards having a greener future and a greener world. So I believe those are the three priority areas I would want to recommend, particularly to ministers of education around the world. I know that different countries are at various stages in terms of their own implementation of their frameworks for ensuring that they have green economies. But irrespective of where you are in the spectrum, I believe that attention should be placed on resource allocation, on collaboration among all stakeholders, and we have to ensure that we have all hands on deck. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Minister, for that important response. There you are, James. I appreciate you coming back.
How you doing, Danny?
Doing well, thanks. Listen, going back to my question earlier, you talked about the importance of a balanced, pragmatic approach, that it should be evolutionary versus revolutionary. Tell us why you feel that that's important when the narrative today is about going green right away with climate change going on. Thanks very much.
Yeah, Danny, absolutely. And it's very important that we develop clean forms of energy. But there is a process, and we need to be pragmatic so we don't hurt the unintended populations that a fast transition can encounter. We need to focus on really four areas: energy source reliability, short and long-term energy source sustainability, and market viability, which is crucial. Smart and pragmatic use of our current energy resources that includes also clean nuclear energy. And four, and very important, is energy access and affordability to all users and increasing workforce development in these areas. But this is a approach that needs to be pragmatic. And in history, we have been more of an evolutionary energy change. This is more of a revolutionary change that we're experiencing and pushing in some sectors. But while we're doing this, we have to understand the realities economically and structurally today in order to fulfill the needs of tomorrow. And that's being pragmatic and smart and using all of our energy resources. And lowering the carbon footprint is, of course, a priority, but we have to do so by utilizing, again, all our resources to make sure our national grid and grids around the world are fulfilled with the energy use. So it's very important, these key elements of doing it properly and to make sure we make no mistakes.
Thank you for that important message, James, and thanks so much for joining us. You know, we'll go on to our next question now. Do we have Ambassador Wabi there?
Yes, I am with you.
Thank you, Ambassador. I did want to ask you a question about the importance of the partnership with the Arab League and your thoughts on what might be some very specific ways that the Arab League can work with the rest of the world to implement some of the necessary changes that we know that are going to be important from a climate change perspective in the near term.
Thank you very much. The Arab League and the countries of the region are actually working voluntarily on these issues because they have understood and came to the conclusion that the present types of growth are not sustainable, that natural resources, if are not used in a sustainable manner, will be depleted in no time, and there is a risk for our future generations. Coming from that specific point of view, they have taken actions. Not all the actions are up to the wishes, but there are a lot of challenges. There is a need to institutionalize green growth as a cross-cutting issue that needs to be integrated in all sectors of the economy. There is a need to enact laws and enforce policies and regulations to that effect. There is a need for assessments of vulnerabilities and costs of the present ways of growth. There is a need of high levels of coordination at the national level between the different sectors. And there is a big problem of data and information availability and accessibility. Addressing these challenges and establishing a framework for monitoring and evaluation can be key issues in promoting green growth and green economy, and also as well as knowledge and possible impacts, awareness, technical skills, experiences and capabilities of human, logistic and financial planning. All these come together and help the decision-taking process into taking and implementing green growth policies and green economy approach in the developmental process in the countries. However, centralization in decision-making is also a challenge. Therefore, there is a need for more delegations of authorities and to the regions, to the locals, to make them, to enable them to be able to address these issues, to increase their awareness and to make green growth a reality on the ground. Thank you.
Shukran, Madam Ambassador. I thank you for your important and gracious words. We'll now move to, I believe we're going to Mr. Solari. And for this question, I'll switch to Spanish if you don't mind. Doctor Solari, muchísimas gracias por estar con nosotros. Si nos puede hablar un poco, por favor, sobre cómo el gobierno del Perú está trabajando para proteger a los niños, proteger la comunidad deshabitada, igualdad de género, los derechos de los indígenas que han inmigrado a la frontera o países vecinos, por ser víctimas del problema de cambio climático y desastres naturales. Por favor.
Indudablemente, le agradezco la pregunta. Es muy pertinente, además. Hay dos escenarios, ¿no es verdad? El Perú es un país en vía de desarrollo con grandes dificultades de desarrollo económico, social, etcétera, y grandes brechas en toda índole. Y sí, el Perú hace innumerables esfuerzos para poder, digamos, articular políticas públicas que tengan que ver con todas estas problemas que usted ha mencionado. Pero la situación que actualmente estamos enfrentando y que poco a poco vamos ya superando, pero aún no hemos superado, y que ha traído grandes cambios que van a ser de alguna manera hasta irreversibles en algunos aspectos por la cuestión del COVID, da nuevos retos, ¿no es verdad? Y el Perú siempre ha sido más grande que sus problemas. Y entonces debemos imaginar que efectivamente con un poco de esfuerzo implementará las políticas públicas que tiendan a paliar los problemas que en diferentes escenarios usted ha mencionado. La educación, y los panelistas anteriores han hablado muchísimo de ello, es uno de los aspectos principales. Socializar la educación sobre, digamos, para traer a conciencia aspectos de la preservación del entorno y del medio ambiente, indudablemente es un objetivo, pero a veces las políticas públicas chocan con una realidad, ¿no es verdad? Y las realidades a veces pesan más que las buenas intenciones. Y ese es el gran struggle que creo que los países en vías de desarrollo como el Perú tienen que afrontar. Las necesidades económicas, sociales, hacen que las personas efectúen actividades informales. Por ejemplo, uno de los grandes problemas que nosotros tenemos en nuestra Amazonía es la tala de bosques e indudablemente la contaminación ambiental producto de actividades irregulares, ilegales, como la minería, por ejemplo. O a veces la falta de desarrollo, ¿no es verdad? Y nuevas tecnologías hace que aspectos industriales en la minería, por ejemplo, ya no estoy hablando de la minería ilegal, necesariamente la que ocurre en Madre de Dios, ni nada por el estilo, donde hay una desforestación alarmante y contaminación de suelos, sino también voy a hablar de la minería extractiva, porque nuestros países en vía de desarrollo son básicamente, como en el Perú, son básicamente extractivos, y estamos hablando de que dentro de esta extracción está el uso de, está la actividad minera, pero la actividad minera formal. Pero por esa falta de, digamos, de elementos tecnológicos modernos, esta actividad minera formal tiene grandes índices de contaminación también. Y esto, claro está, pese a que hay leyes y disposiciones en este sentido de que toda actividad económica y extractiva, en este caso, debe estar consensuada con las poblaciones del entorno, ¿no es verdad? Y debe tener el consentimiento, pues a veces es un poco para el Estado difícil controlar los niveles de cumplimiento que hay en este sentido. Y estoy hablando de dos aspectos, digamos, que hacen a la economía y que por la economía misma, digamos, es esa falta de desarrollo sostenible en el sector económico, pues indudablemente conlleva a problemas de carácter social. Y sí, yo creo que hay una carencia en parte de lo que es el Perú, hay una carencia de aplicación de políticas y mejor del control de estas políticas que están escritas y están normadas. Por un lado. Por otro lado, usted hablaba de la migración. Sí, hay una migración, si se quiere, y esto se ha visto muy bien, y el embajador Lázaro lo debe conocer perfectamente. Hay una migración transfronteriza, digamos, de las poblaciones, si se quiere, indígenas, amazónicas, por un lado, pero también Perú, por ejemplo, más allá de esta migración transfronteriza, ha venido teniendo por años una migración del campo a la ciudad, ¿no es verdad? Del campo a la ciudad, en donde emigran a zonas más desarrolladas, si se quiere, pero y emigran porque en sus hábitats, en sus zonas de origen, no encuentran un desarrollo. Estas migraciones son internas, pero crean problemas, ¿no es verdad?, en otras áreas, digamos, que se consideran más desarrolladas, como son las áreas costeras, en el caso del Perú. El gobierno hace todos los esfuerzos. Existe toda una legislación, digamos, vigente, ¿no es verdad? Falta algún control en la implementación de las normas, falta, digamos, una mayor cooperación de la ciudadanía. Entendemos que, y lo dije hace un momento, entendemos que la ciudadanía, ante las nuevas circunstancias que ha traído el COVID y que algunas de ellas son irreversibles y que ha traído una nueva correlación, digamos, una nueva correlación intersocietal, por decirlo así, pues hace más difícil las cosas en estas circunstancias. Pero ya lo dije, el Perú es más grande que sus problemas y estoy seguro que poco a poco iremos saliendo de este asunto con la educación debida, porque yo creo que allí se sustenta, digamos, toda esta nueva corriente que tiene que ver con la supervivencia misma de la humanidad.
Doctor Solari, agradecemos mucho su tiempo, su experiencia, su sabiduría, y gracias de nuevo. I'm going to switch back to English and I'm going to go back to James Campos. Can we get James back?
Danny.
Good to see you again, James. James, I'm going to ask you a brief question. Let's go back to the United States for a moment. We know that the population of the United States continues to change dramatically. Can you take a moment briefly to explain the importance of diversity in the energy sector in the United States and based on your experience?
Sure, absolutely. And Danny, you referenced an important question. Diversity is critical to the energy health of the future in the United States. The numbers don't lie. K through 12, for example, we're now a minority majority. By 2040, 2050, minority majority country, and the energy sector is growing throughout our country, and we're lacking a steady flow of qualified workers within these areas, and these qualified workers will come from the minority communities across our nation. So it's an imperative measure that we take concerted effort in increasing the participation, access to energy opportunities. It's critical for our nation.
Thank you, James, and I really appreciate your kind words. You know, let's bring back all the panelists so I can make a couple of brief remarks. Fantastic. You know, from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank each and every one of our panelists for their important information, their wisdom, their insight. You know, working together, we'll be able to accomplish some significant changes and make sure that we can make the world a better place for our children, our grandchildren, and for the future. This really sets the stage for what's going to be an incredibly important and valuable summit over the next couple of days. Thank you all so very much. I really appreciate it. To our panelists.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We continue with the awards. Thank you so much, Vargas, for your participation. Thank you so much, and hopefully all the attendees enjoy this amazing summit. Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, panelists. Now it's my honor and privilege to announce our Gold Award recipients. You know, first of all, we have His Excellency Saeed Mohammed Al Tayer, MD and CEO, as the most influential ambassador empowering sustainable development in the Middle East for 2021. Excellent. Our next award would go to Your Majesty, His Excellency Oba Shahid Ademola Elegushi, as the most influential king in Crown empowering transition climate action in Africa for 2021. Our next awardee is Mr. Tony Sanchez, Executive Vice President for Business Development and External Relations at Envy Energy, and he receives the award for Sustainable Energy Executive for the year 2021 in the United States. And next we have Juan Manuel Barrientos, Chef and Advocate for Peace. He receives the award for Sustainable Development Young Chef of the Year in the Americas region. And finally, last but not least, is Mr. Derek Chambers, former National Football League player, receives the award for Sustainable Ambassador Athlete of the Year 2021 for the United States. Say congratulations to all of our awardees. And once again, we thank them for all of their contributions to the world and to their own respective countries and regions. As for myself, I want to thank you all for your participation. I want to thank you for your interest in the World Green Growth Summit and the organization. I hope you have a wonderful, blessed day. Be safe, aim high, and thrive. Thank you all so very much. Appreciate it.